Hi, this is Mike Bielawski with True North Reports TV. We have our other writer, Lou Varricchio, on the phone again, and we've got our stories to talk about. Now, the title of the show is Businesses Leaving, and we were just joking before going on air that it's kind of a bummer, but the headline, I mean, but that's what journalists do. You know, we're supposed to look at things that people don't want to hear and things that people, would rather not see. But anyway, Lou, do you want to talk a little bit about just how it's going and what you've been up to before we dive into it?
Yeah. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, sure. It's always a pleasure. Talk with my colleague on air. And no, it's been an interesting month, as it usually always is. I guess a lot of us are, focusing on Vermont, but also getting distracted by the national news and the quote unquote impeachment inquiry hearings.
And the Roger Stone debacle. Free Roger Stone. Little
happened today.
Little
well, I guess that's not what we're going to talk about, but
no.
You can't avoid it, but it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, no, I've been as far as Vermont news goes, I had my head in kind of economic stories in the past week, and my piece on what I titled "A Tale of Two Economies."
Yeah.
Kind of a nod to Charles Dickens and The Tale of Two Cities.
Mm-hmm.
Being it was
I like that.
The best of times and it was the worst of times.
And we have Charles Dickens' photo in the article.
Yeah. I thought it was nice to give a little nod to the Bard of 19th century Bard, that is. Anyway, his novel, of course, wrote about the dissimilarities between 1790s London and Paris, and of course he wrote the book in the early 1800s, but the setting of the novel takes place at the time of the French Revolution. And I guess the only thing that struck me was Vermont is kind of the London and Paris. It's the best of times, it seems, beyond our borders, but the worst of times if you're here in Vermont. And I won't say it's the end of the world, and certainly our economy has been struggling for years, but it just seemed a lot of really troubling headlines just in the past, I guess you could say since the start of autumn in mid-September, and just a lot of bad news, it seems.
Yep.
So
Hey, I just want to comment on something. It's kind of funny. We had a little, I guess your photo is usually on the screen when you come on the show. Apparently somebody was out today and it didn't get on. So if we could just put the camera back on the phone for a moment.
okay.
I'm waving to the there. I got you on. There's your picture. That's who's on the phone. There's Lou Varricchio. I won't leave it there for the whole show.
So I look like a phone. Is that it?
This is the photo. I think it's the photo from your True North page. I found it on the internet. Just on a Google search.
Yeah, I don't
anyway, I'm going to take that away.
Different from that. That's maybe about 2 years old, but I haven't changed much.
Okay. You look very intellectual. You got black glasses on and a nice suit and tie. Looks good. So getting back to the article, it sounds like businesses are leaving Vermont, right? Isn't that the point, that businesses are leaving? I heard some businesses left Bennington, right? And
yes.
Yep.
Well, I guess it kind of started with the announcement about Global Foundries, which of course is can't really technically call it an American company because I think a lot of it is based in Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but anyway, that's the company that bought out IBM's chip manufacturing operation, which is really sad because IBM is, gosh, we could get into the whole deal of what's happening to American manufacturing. It's
It's
just
come back a little bit in
out
the last 2 years,
everything.
has it?
And God forbid there'll be a war, because we'll end up being like Germany was, which is importing all our energy and
Oh, yeah.
being in a mess. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, it started with Global Foundries. Anyway, they bought the IBM Essex Junction plant
Mm-hmm.
a few years back.
Wow.
But they've been slowly, laying off people left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is the
most
tech sector
recently
not doing
was
great? What's
about,
up with that?
I believe, several dozen employees.
Mm-hmm.
Then that was followed by the Energizer battery plant in Bennington County, and that was well. The funny thing is, just a year ago, the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development awarded Energizer something like almost $72,000 for a training grant program to train workers and create 10 new positions, which was kind of for naught. I know a lot of those decisions are made in corporate offices,
Mm-hmm.
where I think in a lot of cases executives are pretty insulated from what's going on. I mean, look at the problems with General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of tone deaf when it comes to workers, but that's
Right.
another issue. Anyway, Energizer, they have been laying off people probably starting about 6 years ago, and it was kind
Yeah.
of like a dripping faucet. And it's
So many batteries are rechargeable nowadays, right?
right,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty much, I believe, the Bennington area has lost something like 2,000 jobs since the 2008 Great Recession, and
Yeah.
that.
They built a bypass around Bennington too, like 10 or 15 years ago. I remember my dad saying, because I grew up in Troy, New York, which is like, I don't know, 15, 20 miles away across the border. And we would go to Bennington a lot. We would go to the restaurants. My grandmother was in one of the Bennington nursing homes before she passed away.
It's a nice
And
little town.
It's a beautiful town. They got the Bennington Monument. They got a lot of old architecture. And I remember my father saying when they built this bypass, you're not going to have people driving through Bennington to get to, I guess it would be Route 7 to go up towards, Montpelier or wherever.
No.
And that's, some people, they just want to go where they're going and they're not going to stop, but some people do stop. And that's a big deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the case of Bennington, I'll disclose that I taught a couple of courses at Community College of Vermont at the Bennington campus,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically one course a semester.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to know a lot of people in Bennington. It's a really nice community. Of course, like all communities today, it has its problems with
Sure.
addiction and
Yeah.
crime related to that. But it's a nice community. I don't buy personally that bypasses hurt downtowns.
Really?
I don't know. I mean, I know the town of Middlebury, where I live, has fought a bypass since the 1950s for fear of, I don't know. I guess they assume traffic gridlock will get people to just bail out of their cars and go shopping. I never understood the logic of why running bypasses is bad for community. I mean, it depends what's in the community, what you can attract, and do you have parking? I mean, a lot of these downtowns don't do much in the way of getting cars off the streets, and people come down to go shopping. That's the case of Middlebury. Of course, we even have a big construction project going on now, which is rail related. And there's no parking, so they put in some new buildings, and they end up reducing parking spaces. So I think a lot of problems deal more with inner town planning than bypasses. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe someone could make a case for bypasses being a bad idea, but I mean, at what point do you? There's something like 35,000 cars driving through downtown Middlebury a day on Route 7.
Yeah.
And that all gets like funneled into a narrow little area, and at certain times of the day, it's just not pleasant driving through those kind of towns. But anyway, so poor Bennington is dealing with a lot of economic upheaval now with the Energizer plant.
Yeah.
So, it's not the only area that's being affected.
Yeah. You got a list of companies here in your article. You mentioned Global Foundries, Energizer, Dealer.com, Social Sentinel, My Web Grocer, Sears, another magazine. So is there a common theme here? Do each of these companies say why they're closing or give any hints as to why they're packing up and leaving?
I mean, in fairness, the Sears, what I did was
they're
kind of
closing
list,
all over, right? All over the country.
The bad news, yeah. The bad news for Vermont just in the past, I would say since the start of autumn. But yeah, in fairness to the Sears, Sears has been contracting stores.
Right.
There was a fear of Sears going out of business completely, but that doesn't seem to be happening. I think they're trying to get a handle on it. But that did affect, of course, among the 51 stores and 45 Kmarts that Sears was closing nationally, South Burlington at the University Mall, there happened to be one of those 51 Sears. So unfortunately, it was in the crossfire, and I guess a liquidation sale is supposed to start, for Black Friday for that store. So, it's kind of sad, but when they have those going out of business sales, that's when you see more people going into the store than you do.
Right, than you do normally.
Yeah, I mean, people are I hate to say it, but people are kind of like vultures, on the Serengeti closing in when they see a carcass. There they are. And it's sad, but, with online, people saying we should buy local, but then everybody goes to Amazon.com and buys things. So
right, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, who, speaking of national
politics, I don't know how you fight that over time, but
yeah.
Then the other Burlington was Burlington Business People magazine. Am I getting that title correct? It was not a really big circulation color magazine. It was done for the Chittenden County, and Business People, Vermont. It was the title of it, and it supposedly covered the entire state, but it was having actually been featured in it myself back in the 1990s when I was the public information director at Champlain College. It was really kind of more of a focus on Greater Burlington and new faces, people in business. It had a lot of interviews. And it was a nice publication. Had very well written. They had good writers, and they looked at Burlington area business, not just the faces of the business, but the actual businesses. And they did a nice job. But it's just, gosh, here we have a business magazine that's closing. So
that's a bummer. Well, anything that's in print is kind of in a sticky spot right now. I know that from my newspaper work, and you're still with a newspaper as well, right? Aren't you still with the Eagle?
I'm editor of the Vermont Eagle, which is a weekly in Addison and the northern part of Rutland County. We're doing, I wouldn't say we're booming, but
you're viable.
we're viable, but then again, we're a free newspaper and we're on a different model. We're advertising paid, and again, you got to fight for the print ads.
Yeah.
That's a different game, but we don't. We're not like, say, the Free Press, the Burlington Free Press, which does rely on a lot of subscriptions and counter sales.
They're probably also, I'm guessing, owned by some other larger corporate media entity, right? I don't know that to be true.
Yeah, it had been owned by Gannett, and then it was sold, and honestly, I haven't followed it. It's did a pretty severe contraction in recent years.
But most of the big major media newspapers nowadays, they are if you look at a media ownership web, they're all kind of interconnected, and that's why you tend to see a lot of the similar stories showing up from one newspaper to the next.
But, a lot of, like our competitor here in Addison County, which is the Addison Independent, they're doing well. I think a lot of people, they are going online to find news. There's, Front Page Forum. There's a whole bunch of these sort of town, I just call them gossip sites, really.
Right, Front Porch Forum, right, yep.
Yeah, there's what did I say?
You said
anyway,
Front Page Forum.
There's no filter, and I say that from an editor's standpoint because, if you don't have an editorial filter, anything can get through. And there's been some wild, I'll get a phone call, someone saying, "Oh, did you see this on
on Front Porch Forum?"
Front Porch
People
Forum.
roast each other on there. I've seen some town gossip on Front Porch Forum where somebody will have a bad experience at a business and they post about how horrible it was, and then all the people who like the business come to their defense, and it becomes a back and forth every edition.
Yeah, it's that's the trouble with social media is it's okay, so you don't like the place and you have a bad experience, and then your modus operandi is to go out in the community and badmouth bad experience, and anyway, my feeling is it's not people go, they look at it. I don't go there for news story leads. I get those from people in the
I do. I'm guilty of that. I check Front Porch Forum for my local newspaper stories. I often do. And there's a lot of press releases on there. People do that. So
yeah, I mean, I try. I just try not to be overly influenced by other media in my little community where I'm trying to get the news.
Right.
I don't want to be an also-ran. I'll get my own stories. Okay, yeah. Sometimes you miss a story. Sometimes you get a scoop. That's just the way of the business. But so getting back to the Business People magazine, it was a little surprising because that had been around since the 1980s, and it was a source for a lot of what's going on with Burlington business. But there again, I guess online, and I'm not sure people. I don't really know what people are looking at in news these days. It's kind of it's hard to gauge what they're interested. They're interested in national stuff,
right?
But only, I would say, the real dedicated voters who are engaged in local issues are reading news, whether it's online or other people are just reading headlines. They're getting
corporate a lot of corporate media news, I think.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
and it's mixed with like what I would say old tabloid style. Celebrity gossip mixed in with real news, and it's a mishmash. So news is just it's a mess today, to be honest with you.
I'm going to pull up one of these media family trees here, just so I can show people.
No.
Media family tree. Here's a couple of good ones. I'll see if I can find one that's camera friendly. Anyway,
we're sort of wandering off the.
Yeah, well, you know what? It is an important topic, though.
No, you're right. You're right.
And I was going to say the reason why print media is still very important and could become more important even in the future is media censorship. Both the corporate media and you've got all this media owned together by Viacom and Disney and. If you look at 90+% of your major news websites and newspapers out there, you could probably tie them to less than a handful of major media companies that are controlling everything that you hear and see. And to think that they don't have their own political agendas and whatnot that's influencing what they print and what they don't print or publish, you'd be fooling yourself.
Sure.
So that's why I think you might see maybe if not at least a brief renaissance of print media, because it tends to be on average, more localized and independently controlled content-wise. So at least that's what I would hope for.
But there again, when if you have, say, a loyal, nice-paying advertiser, and you end up having to write a story that may not paint their business in the best light for some whatever reason, and you lose the advertiser. I mean, I think this has been going on from day one in the news business. Editorial is always isolated from advertising, and that's why you always have advertising people storming into the newsroom saying, "Why did you run that piece?" Our advertiser.
I've seen it. I've seen it happen at the some of the newspapers I've worked at.
Yeah, well, me too. I've been working in papers since the '70s, and that's just kind of part and parcel of the business. You're gonna at some point you're gonna step on somebody's toes, and you're gonna offend someone. And they're not gonna like it, but that's the nature of news.
I know I've stepped on toes. You probably have too.
Oh, sure. Not intentionally, of course, but sometimes it's unavoidable, and you hope, well, geez, people hopefully will have a little reason and understand. But if you're involved and you're in the middle of it, people are upset. They walk away. They take away their advertising.
Yeah.
And now they have other avenues. They can go, badmouth you on Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
Other places, but you just have to develop that thick skin and hope people are reasonable at some point.
In keeping with, and I do think the media conversation is really important, so I'm not regretting that at all, but I do want to tie back in a little bit on the cost of living, or cost to do business, I guess you would say, for Vermont. Now, I imagine a lot of these businesses, whether they publicly announce it or not, Vermont is not typically known to be the most business-friendly state in the nation. I know myself personally, and I think you have too, we've both written articles where Vermont typically ranks like 48 or 49th in the nation for business climate. And I wrote an article that just published 21 hours ago, so yesterday, Governor Scott on Vermont's potential TCI membership. I'm not supportive of a carbon tax. Now, TCI is, oh boy, I'm having a brain fart on air, Transportation and Climate Initiative. And what it is, it's essentially a multi-state carbon cap and trade. So I'm going to try to describe this the best I can.
12 states and
12 states.
D.C.,
And they would agree that if you were a company or a transportation sector or whatever, you would be allocated a certain amount of carbon that you can use. And if you use more than that allocated amount, you would pay for like a carbon credit. And then these carbon credits can be bought and sold and traded and yada yada, and it's a big bureaucracy. So nothing could go wrong with that, of course. But anyway, Governor Scott, if you recall, in 2012, he ran very much so on an anti-carbon tax platform. He even had an entire page of his 2016 campaign dedicated to attacking his then Democrat gubernatorial candidate, Sue Minter, right? Was it Sue Minter? Yeah, Sue Minter, right. And because she would not openly come out against the carbon tax. So yesterday, I think, or maybe it was Wednesday, maybe it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday morning at a press conference, I asked Governor Scott, I said, are you going to join this TCI because you were against it 2 years ago? You must be against it now, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yes, I am.
Okay.
But he is also sending one of his people from the Agency of Natural Resources is going to check it out anyway. So they're scoping it out. Scott already said he's not going to support a carbon tax. He said it again yesterday. But nonetheless, they are monitoring the development of this TCI, this regional carbon tax. Is there something he wants to see or learn about it that we don't already know? I don't know. I would think the governor, he's probably doing the right thing, which is keep tabs on it.
if your neighboring states are getting involved with this, even though your administration opposes it, he probably still wants to find out, what the mission is, and then the possible impact from surrounding states doing this. And so, no, I wouldn't necessarily think just because he's sending a representative that there's something nefarious, that he's going to do a flip-flop.
Right.
That doesn't mean he couldn't.
Well, he said there would be no more gun laws, and then we got S-55.
Right. And so I guess, one should be a little skeptical.
Sure. In fact, the top comment on my article was exactly that, or one of the, it's not the top one anymore, but one of the comments was, well, why should we trust you on this? You did not hold your word on the gun thing. So
the voters have long memories. So
yeah. So anyway, I tend to think you're probably right in your assessment. That's the way he described it to me yesterday at the press conference. He said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said we're scoping it out, we're keeping tabs on it, and he said I'm not going to sign anything that comes out of it if it resembles a carbon tax.
How well attended was that news conference?
Media-wise, there was about 7 or 8 of us there, TV and print media and online media.
And did any of the mainstream media kind of go after him for still saying he's against a carbon tax?
No, I was the only reporter that got into that issue. I asked him first, and then I asked him a follow-up question to kind of have him reiterate his stance. And he was very adamantly, no, I'm not going to sign it. And then I think the next reporter asked a different question on a different topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would wonder how some of the other media in Vermont might think about that. Do they expect him to support a carbon tax? I don't know. But.
Well, the governor has, reneged on some of what we thought were pretty foundational, stances that he had, like you mentioned, gun control. But consistently he's been pretty quote unquote conservative on
the economy
and taxes. I'm sure there are exceptions there, but.
And the gun bills he signed, I'm not making any suggestions on how people should go about buying their gun stuff, but the police did point out S-55 is pretty unenforceable. If somebody wanted their standard capacity magazine or a private sale without a background check, there's almost literally nothing anybody could do about it to stop them.
Yeah.
So, maybe, I don't know if that was Scott's line of thinking when he signed it, like, this looks good on paper, but it's not really enforceable. I don't know. I guess he'll never be able to speak publicly about that. But, he signed it, and it's done.
Right.
So we're at the 1-minute warning. So any closing thoughts for the day? I think I'll just say real quick. So I think the theme here is businesses are leaving. We don't know exactly why they're leaving. I don't know that they always announce why they're leaving. But Vermont is a costly place to work and own a business, right?
Yes, like and what you mentioned earlier, was the Tax Foundation that rated Vermont business climate as 44 out of 50 in the nation, which is bad, and CNBC rated Vermont 40 out of 50 as having a not-so-friendly business climate. So it has not budged. Vermont's perception by businesses as being unfriendly. Now, again, smaller businesses that kind of fit into the, cottage industry thing that a lot of legislators like and prefer for Vermont. They seem to do okay. It's the bigger, I would say, even more international and
I think the small ones
greater
struggle too.
Employer numbers and higher salaries. Those are the companies that are not attracting, that are not being attracted to them.
Well, thanks for coming on. We're about coming to the end of the show, but again, I'm Michael Bielawski, a reporter with True North Reports, and Lou Varricchio, also a reporter with True North Reports, and we are always on the third Friday of the month, and catch us next month.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks for coming on. All right.